That's it. This
Hello, welcome back to episode 4, where we're going to take a look at box number 4. But before we get started on that, I'm going to show you some of my latest pickups. Starting off with some classics that have been recommended to me by
damn fool Idealistic Crusader,
or kind of on the same spirit as what he was suggesting anyway. The Criterion version of Singing in the Rain, which is a beautiful pressing, CAV pressing, widescreen and digital sound. This doesn't have AC3, unlike my other version that I already had, which is Dolby Digital. But I'm keeping both because A, it's Criterion and I like to build up the Criterion collection, and B, it's got extra features and stuff like that, you know. So following on with another classic, Kiss Me Stupid, with Kim Novak and Dean Martin, Ray Walston. Now this part was originally going to go to Peter Sellers, but he had a heart attack and couldn't do it. And in turn, Ray Walston did a pretty good job. It's a very funny plot, I found it anyway, and highly recommend it if you haven't seen this movie. Billy Wilder, writer of this, and he directed it as well. Yeah, so yeah, Billy Wilder movie is always a good guaranteed hit. Another Dean Martin, but this is more of a Julie Holliday film, Bells Are Ringing. Good movie, all about working on the phone exchange line, you know, when they had to run a message service and stuff like that back in the 50s and 60s. Anyway, yeah, this is a beautiful little film, and Julie Holliday is incredible for this. I can't speak so much about Dean Martin on this, but Julie Holliday is fantastic. Beautiful film, Bells Are Ringing. Following up, we have Maltese Falcon. Of course, this is the classic directed by John Hughes, starring Humphrey Bogart. It's a classic crime noir film with a really good storyline and a cool ending. I recommend this film. Yeah, Cincinnati Kid. I love Steve McQueen. I've been watching a whole heap of Steve McQueen films over the last few months. I did Bullet just recently, and the Cincinnati Kid. And yeah, he never fails to please. His classic dialogue in there, very memorable moments. Following on, we have Mr. Rogers. This is the late release. This came out in '99. It's AC3 and widescreen. It has documentaries and stuff like that in it. I wanted it because it's a Henry Fonda film, and ever since watching 12 Angry Men, I've been trying to grab a whole heap of Henry Fonda films because I really liked him in that. And yeah, this was good, but it wasn't so much a Henry Fonda film. I found Jack Lemmon stole the show on this. It was really funny. Good movie. Alright, next up we have Roman Holiday. Yeah, this is written by Trumbo. If anyone knows about his story, knows that he wrote this film. Gregory Peck was amazing. Of course, Audrey Hepburn was sensational, and it's just a really sweet film. By the end, at the end scene when he's handing the photo, you just can't help but going, that's gorgeous. To the opposite end of the scale, we have something very, very dark film. This is Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs with Dustin Hoffman, Susan George. This is an English film, and it's about a scientist who moves to England who gets away from the hustle and bustle, stress of the city. It's a very, very hard film to get through, but great movie to watch nonetheless. This is one me and my partner enjoyed quite a bit. It was Time Rider. This is a Michael Nesmith film. Michael Nesmith was a member of the Monkees, and he's gone on to make very cheesy motorbike futuristic films. Actually, it wasn't that bad. The idea of you know, sending a motorbike back to the Wild West and having, you know, cowboys chasing after a guy on a motorbike, you know, nothing. I've never seen that before, that's for sure, you know. Next up we have Stallone, Cobra. This is only pan and scan, sadly. I wish it was widescreen, but it's a fun movie. What I like about it is how quickly it moves along. You know, before you know it, you're onto the final big boss, and you're like, hey, how did we get there so quickly? This is a Canon Group film. I was trying to get a whole bunch of Canon movies, and of course trying to get all Sylvester Stallone, so this ticks off 2 boxes in one hit. And you can't have one without the other Canon film, Over the Top. Sylvester Stallone again. Yeah, this was the last of the Canon films that they did together. Okay, fizzing up with the last 3 with a bit of cheese. This one's Max Headroom, the first episode of the TV show Max Headroom that shows how the reporter got sucked into the computer and became, you know, the Max Headroom character that we all got to know through the 80s. I look forward to watching a few more episodes if I ever stumble upon it. And lucky last of the pickups is Mac and Me. This is pan and scan, but digital sound, and has the classic McDonald's scene that we watched. I used to love this movie as a kid, but as an adult, it's so bad, you know. It's still cute, I guess. I'm still going to keep it, I reckon. Yeah, so that's it for the pickups for now. Now let's move on to the fourth box. Okay, so starting off with box number 4 for today, we have the Criterion version of Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. And this is a great pressing of the film. CAV, of course, because Criterion does that, widescreen. A sensational movie. I love the artwork on the back. That reminds me of, I had that printed out on my folder when I was in high school. Moving on, we have a Mel Brooks classic, Dracula. Dead and loving it. Actually, when I say classic, that's really pushing it. It's not a classic. I'm trying to get all the Mel Brooks films, as I mentioned in another video, and this is, yeah, one of the last ones he did after Men in Tights, I believe, yeah. Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. This is widescreen and digital sound, which is cool. And this is the story of Bruce Lee. Well, a story similar to Bruce Lee's story. It's an enjoyable film, but I mean, if you really want Bruce Lee action, you chuck on Bruce Lee, you know. Next up, we have Dragonheart. This is a beautiful story. If anyone hasn't seen this movie, this is well worth grabbing. This is Dolby Surround and widescreen, which is the way I recommend getting it because it's nice and cheap, but you can get a signature version of this disc and it's really nice too. Anything with Michael Keaton is always good. This is The Dream Team with Christopher Lloyd, Peter Boyle and Stephen Furst, directed by Howard Zeif. This is a lovely little movie about 4 guys who get trapped out in the middle of New York and try to find their way back, and it's a light-hearted comedy. It's a good movie. Okay, so next one we have is Driving Me Crazy. And I got this again because of its video game connections. This movie was the other movie besides The Wizard that was chosen by Nintendo to include footage from the Super Mario Bros. 3 game. It's also kind of funny. Billy D. Williams is funny in this too, so it's not a terrible film to have. Alright, next up we have John Badham's Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes. This is AC3 and widescreen. Nice presentation. It's just, it's a very forgettable, I guess you could say, as far as action movies go. Next up we have something a bit more, this is a bit more artistic. Ridley Scott's The Duelist with Harvey Keitel and Keith Carradine. Beautiful movie, really, really beautifully shot, acted, directed, and it just, yeah, this is definitely a great movie to get. The Duelist. It's about a guy who feels like he's been embarrassed by another member of the French army and wants to create amends. In turn, is constantly trying to duel as they're going through different wars and different times of their life. He's still trying to fight with him. Really like this movie a lot. A bit more something to the opposite end of the scale, we have Dumb and Dumber. That's quite the, as far as opposites go, this is it, yeah. This is Farrelly Brothers film. Jim Carrey, Jeff Daniels. Pan and scan, but still digital sound. Nonetheless, it's a complete opposite of Duelist. It really is a very dumb movie, but fun. Next up we have Steven Spielberg's Duel, which is his first film that he did, I believe. Yeah, this is a really cool film about a killer truck chasing after this dude through the hills. Widescreen with stereo sound, digital stereo sound. Really amazing that Steven Spielberg could come up with such a cool, suspenseful film on his first try. I wish I could make films like that. Next up we have Dune. This is David Lynch. This is widescreen with AC3. Great pressing. Next up we have Earthquake. This is a star-studded film starring mostly Charlton Heston. But this is also directed by John Sturges, who made The Great Escape, and written by Mario Puzo, who wrote The Godfather, and, well, the original Godfather book. And this is widescreen with digital sound. I mostly bought this movie because there was a big thing back in the 70s called Sense Surround, where they brought in these big giant subwoofers that would shake when the earthquake went off. Sounded interesting. Next up we have the Tim Burton movie Ed Wood, starring Johnny Depp. This is a great film, a really great film. You really feel for the characters in this, especially Ed Wood and Bela Lugosi in this character, and all very convincing. Just a lot of love and care went into this film, the making of this film. Having said that, I don't really watch Ed Wood's films that much. This is Ed Wood's Collection Volume 1 with Plan 9, Night of the Ghouls and Jailbait all on one. Then we have the Ed Wood Collection Volume 2. This one's actually a gatefold. Way! And yeah, this one has Glen or Glenda and Bride of the Monster. You know, Bride of the Monster is very oh, those two films actually are very famous. But Plan 9 from Outer Space is where it's at, really. Continuing on with a bit more Tim Burton, this is Edward Scissorhands. Sadly, it only came out in pan and scan, this film, on Laserdisc. Digital sound, though. And yeah, a really great film. Diane Wiest. As I've said before, Diane Wiest is always good in every movie she's in. Winona Ryder I didn't really like in that. This was one of my favourite movies growing up. I used to listen to the soundtrack a lot when I was a kid. It's about a computer that came alive, directed by Steve Barron. This is pan and scan, but it has digital sound, although the digital soundtrack is a little bit weak on the disc. Next up we have another Steven Spielberg film, Empire of the Sun. This is a beautiful movie, although very sad at times, and very shocking. This has Christian Bale when he was very young, and John Malkovich is also in this. A very sweet story about a boy living through World War II and all the tragedy that surrounds it. And it includes an extra documentary at the end called The China Odyssey. One of the lesser known Steven Spielberg films. I didn't really know of it that much before I got into it later on. The Endless Summer. This was an old tape we used to have as a kid. Great footage of surfing. It has a real atmosphere that you could never recreate these days, and because it was so raw and because it was so real, you just couldn't redo something like, well, you could, but it would just feel a lot different. It wouldn't have the same kind of vibe. Pan and scan, sadly, and analog sound, but nonetheless glad to have it. Next up we have, oh, this is a great film, Enemy Mine, with Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid. Wolfgang Peterson directed it. It has an incredible storyline. It's about two enemies that fight and they get stuck on a planet together, and they have to basically rely on each other in order to stay alive on this planet, this foreign planet together. And then becoming friends, and there's a lot more to the story, and I don't want to give it away. It's definitely worth picking up if you haven't got this one yet. Alright, next up we have The English Patient. I wasn't a big fan of this film, although I don't mind it. My partner was quite a fan of it though. Yeah, Ralph Fiennes and William Dafoe is in this. Chris and Scott Thomas, Dolby Digital with widescreen. Big award winner at the time. Swept up the Oscars, if I remember correctly. This is a sweet little movie. The Englishman who went up a hill and came down a mountain. It's not for everybody. It's a very small, it's a sweet little, you know, comedy. Hugh Grant. Yeah, basically it's about a scientist who measures landscape. These guys wanted a mountain that they can have their town be recognised by, so put a whole bunch of buckets of dirt on the top of their hill. You know, it was quite funny here. Eric the Viking. This is directed by Terry Jones, who's from Monty Python. It has Tim Robbins. Also has John Cleese and Mickey Rooney. Eric the Viking. This is pan and scan. The digital sound. I can't say I love this movie, but I like Terry Jones and I like Monty Python. I'm a big Monty Python nerd, so I got it because of that reason. Next up we have Event Horizon. This is a good horror movie. Not that scary, but Nice, neat special effects. Sam Neill is awesome, and Lawrence Fishburne is awesome, and those two alone. Dolby Digital with widescreen. Excalibur. I know Patrick Stewart was in this. He was really good. To be honest, I spent a lot of time waiting for him to show up in the film. John Borman was the director. This is the widescreen Laserdisc with digital sound. It's a really nice telling of the famous King Arthur story in a really nitty-gritty, realistic kind of way. It's okay. Bit of executive decision. This is the widescreen AC3 uncut with the scenes that are not even on the DVD and Blu-ray with the Quran and all that kind of stuff. It was really raw and gritty, and Steven Seagal, although dies in the first half of the movie, he definitely makes a huge impact. Next up we have John Travolta in The Experts. They go to a town that they think is some kind of city in America, and they realise, but what they don't know, it's actually a Russian town that has been painted to look like American. It's funny, trust me, it's funny. And the way I'm thinking back to it, maybe I don't want to keep it, but I'm not sure. We'll see. I'll watch it again. Next up, we have Extreme Measures. This is a really good film. I like this one. It's widescreen with Dolby Surround, so just digital sound. Hugh Grant and Gene Hackman again. Gene Hackman's in a lot of Laserdisc, isn't he? This is a cool thriller film. Yeah, I recommend it. Well, this is the Australian pressing of this film. As you can see on the front, there's a... Oh no, I've taken mine off. There's usually a Disney little sticker on the front. That's how you know usually it's an Australian copy. But this is THX widescreen with AC3 Face Off. This is a great John Woo, isn't it? Nick Cage, John Travolta. Got them pressed like this because that's how the covers. And yeah, it's a really good pressing because this is the Australian pressing without the rot. Okay, next up we have Fallen. This is a really cool movie. This is late release. Denzel Washington, and directed by Gregory Hoblit. This is a cool little supernatural movie where he goes around singing "Time Is On My Side." I remember seeing this on telly when it was still kind of new and liking it a lot and then grabbing it. It's a good little movie though. The idea of being able to transfer your spirit just by touching one another and moving on, you know, that was cool. Okay, next up we have Falling Down with Michael Douglas and Robert Duvall. This is directed by Joel Schumacher, who also made the Phone Booth movie and the classic Batman movie. And yeah, this was actually a really, really brilliant film. The end of it felt a bit weak, but Robert Duvall did a great job. Michael Douglas was sensational, and it was a definite standout role for him because he was always the good guy before that. Oh, one of the best movies to ever own on Laserdisc. This is Fargo. This is a story about a car salesman that wants to off his wife and hires these professional hitmen to do it. Yeah, everything goes off kilt. This is a Joel and Ethan Coen film. Same guys who made The Big Lebowski. If you haven't seen any of their films, see if you can get all of them and just have a big binge session. You won't be disappointed. But Fargo was one of my definite favourites for sure. The character who is the police chief who's pregnant is just an amazing character, and you can't get enough. I wish the movie was longer with her in it. You just don't want it to end. Next up we have a comedy. This is Fatal Instinct, widescreen, I believe, yes, and it's a Carl Reiner film, digital sound, and it's a bit like a Naked Gun kind of movie without as many jokes that will actually land. The jokes are a lot of stupid stuff, you know, and of course they're parodying the Sleeping with the Enemy and the Pretty Woman movies that were out and that were big at the time.
Round one, fight!
This is widescreen, also directed and produced by Charles Shire. Father's Day, this was okay. It wasn't Robin Williams' best film by a long shot. Fear, this was okay again. Mark Wahlberg, one of his first films. Widescreen with digital sound and directed by James Foley. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. This is inspired by the book by Hunter S. Thompson. Big fan of Hunter S. Thompson. His books are fantastic if you haven't read them. This is directed by Terry Gilliam. Stars Johnny Depp. Really out there film. And we have Fearless with Jeff Bridges. This is when he survives a plane crash and thinks he can live forever because of it. Really amazing film. Isabella Rossellini, of course. Jeff Bridges is incredible in this, and it's one of those films that will leave you thinking about it for days and days and days to come afterwards. This is widescreen with digital sound too.
You win.
I love this movie though. Ferris Bueller's Day Off with Matthew Broderick, directed by John Hughes. Yeah, what can you say? It hasn't been said like a million times, or emulated by Deadpool. We have a widescreen disc with digital sound, so it's a good presentation of the film. And even as an adult, I still like to go back and have a day off with Ferris. Next up we have Jackie Chan's First Strike, which was filmed up north in Brisbane in Australia, as well as other places, but one of the places was definitely up north in Australia, which is really cool to see. Overall, yeah, this is a fun movie though. I really like the Super Cop series, and this I think was the last one of the series. Technically, this is Super Cop 5. Stanley Tong was a director, as well as a lot of Jackie Chan movies he directed, and has the famous jumping onto the helicopter scene, as you can see on the back up here. So yeah, overall, great presentation, widescreen and Dolby Digital. It's a fish called Wonder. I believe this is pan and scan, yes, and it's digital sound, yes. John Cleese, Michael Palin, Kevin Kline, who stole the show in this film, and Jamie Lee Curtis, who is gorgeous as always. I was a big fan of this growing up and found the movie really sweet and lovely, and I'm really glad to have this. Although I'm not a massive fan of the somewhat sequel, Fierce Creatures, with the same cast, Michael Palin, John Cleese, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Kevin Kline. Yeah, I wasn't as fond of this one as I was of the first film, but it was still nice, and it's great seeing the old cast get back together again. Next up we have probably the most famous Luc Besson film, up there with probably this or Professional. I reckon this would be more famous than Professional. Fifth Element, widescreen with Dolby Digital AC3. Bruce Willis. Yeah, good film. I love Luc Besson films, so I try to get all Luc Besson films, and this is, well, his most famous Luc Besson film. I would love to get this in DTS or something like that. You know, maybe I'll get it on Blu-ray. I think it might be time for a Blu-ray of this, although it's a good pressing. This is an amazing film. If you haven't seen this, check this out. If you record one disc from my collection, Final Approach, and if you like this, then come back and check out some other recommendations. But this is the first disc I'd recommend to anybody who loves good film. On the cover this says this is the first ever movie that used digital sound. Having said that, it's not a movie that needed digital sound. A lot of the movie is a dialogue, just like how 12 Angry Men is just dialogue. The actors really hold a really strong performance. The storyline is fantastic and the twist is sensational. I just watched this again last night for the first time in ages, and I must say I don't feel like it doesn't hold up in the way of pacing. I like Sidney Pollack. He was great when he did Out of Africa, and although his movies are beautifully shot, the pacing on this film is just a tad slow for the action that it's meant to convey. Widescreen, THX pressing with digital sound, plenty of Tom Cruise running scenes. Okay, next up we have The First Wives Club, a classic comedy from the 90s with Bette Midler, Goldie Hawn and Diane Keaton, right? Directed by Hugh Wilson. And this is about three women who are struggling to move on from their divorce and trying to find the strength within each other. It's just a major chick flick. It really is a fun chick flick, but this is a fun movie. Flash Gordon with Sam J. Jones and of course Timothy Dalton as the bad guy. But it's a fun movie. It's just a fun, silly old movie. It's widescreen with digital sound. And yeah, if you've watched Ted and you didn't understand all the Flash Gordon memes that they were throwing around in that film, it's really worth checking out this film first and then go back and watching Ted again, and then you will understand twice the amount of jokes in that film because they're all based around this movie. Next up we have Stephen Baldwin in a non-overly Christian film. This is Fled with Lawrence Fishburne, and yeah, look at that big sticker on the front of it. Isn't that attractive? There we go. Okay, so yeah, what can you say? It's these two criminals are chained together. It was a really good, solid action film when it came out. Kevin Hooks is the director. Widescreen, AC3. I like it. Yeah, it's good disc to have. Not great, but good. And last but not least, we have the Flower Drum Song. This is an all Asian cast, and it's a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical. Directed by Henry Costa, and although it wasn't the biggest budget Rodgers and Hammerstein film, it's a really high quality one still, nonetheless. And I think the fact that it was made in the 60s rather than the 50s meant they had a bit more technology behind the wheel, which helped make an excellent musical, you know. So that's it for my collection for this week, and we'll get on to some hardware next time. But until then, please subscribe as always if you haven't yet, and come back next week and we'll do it all over again, but box number 5.